Today's guest is Cutler Knupp. He's the director at Dystruptek, which is a investment arm of the Haskell Company. So Cutler, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks for hosting me.
Sometimes I like to lead off with sort of personal question. What is your best childhood memory?
Wow, my best childhood memory. Okay, so I was very fortunate to be homeschooled for much of my younger years, and I grew up in rural North Georgia, and so had plenty of land to run around and cause all sorts of mayhem. So probably had something to do with running around with my friends, shooting stuff with BB guns, or shooting off fireworks or something along those lines. But yeah, I had a pretty free wild childhood.
Well, it's before social media, right? You're safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I do my, it only took me about, 3 hours or so to knock out my classwork in the morning. And after that, it was like free reign. So looking back in hindsight, it was a great childhood, sure.
That's awesome. Now, tell me more about your background. You're with Haskell, which we'll talk more about. But what was your background? How'd you get into all this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure like you probably found from talking to the wide variety of people that you meet with on a regular basis, kind of just one thing led to another, and then now I'm here. But as far as my background, I always been interested in kind of the finance venture realm of things. When I was in college, I had a small startup of my own, and so always kind of been interested in what it takes to be an entrepreneur. My father and my grandfather were both entrepreneurs as well, and so I'd always been interested in that. So I studied finance as my major in school. And then once I graduated, I did several internships during that process, everything from investment banking to Chamber of Commerce type stuff to the startup on my own, like I mentioned, and then found myself working for an IT services company out of Atlanta under the CFO that they brought on, and he ran M&A for UPS, and so I found myself in this kind of cutting my teeth pretty quick on what is corporate development. So understanding what a successful acquisition strategy looks like, growing a business to a certain point, and then bringing on outside capital partners to really scale it accordingly. So ended up growing IT services company, kind of transitioned into software development. Grew that from about a $40 million business to about close to 300 million, and then it got acquired by a company called Cognizant Technologies, and now it services as their digital consulting services arm. So interesting, great experience. And then right about that time, I got married, and my wife took her residency down in Jacksonville, Florida. So relocated, and then kind of got sick of bouncing back and forth, and was kind of at a plateau with where I was at. And so I started to kind of look at some opportunities, and came across this pretty unique position to lead the corporate venture arm for the Haskell Company. So
Awesome. So you talked about you figuring out how to lead a successful acquisition or M&A side. What are the fundamentals there?
yeah, so I mean, fundamentals are understanding obviously your business, where you fit in the market. Also, growing trends of where to kind of position yourself. I guess sports analogies like skate to where the puck's going to be, and so understanding kind of what's trending, especially in something that's as fast moving as IT services and software development, where you were essentially just using teams of folks similar to Haskell. Instead of building buildings, you were building software products, and so the only difference is that what skills are in demand and the rate of change with those skills. There's basic engineering skills that were needed 100 years ago and still needed today in order to get things done. They use different tools for that, but in software, it's a much more rapidly evolving process, and so kind of balancing those. So from the perspective of the overall strategy, to industry agnostic, it's really understanding where your company sits and where you need to be growing and what you need in order to be successful in those skill sets. So identifying that, and then from there, it's being efficient at what you're doing. So doing deals, there's a lot of variables. So you could be sitting on something everything's got their own pace as far as what's moving at what points in time. And so understanding that you've got a robust pipeline, you can act quickly when you see a good opportunity because there's nothing that kills deals like time. And so you don't want to let things sit for too long, move quickly. And then, if you get a bad taste in your mouth from, whether it's a management meeting or whether something in diligence pops up that you just have an uneasy feeling in your gut about, you got to be able to, quickly make decisions to, keep fishing or cut bait. So I would say that, some of those intrinsic things are important. And then overall, it really comes down to the people. So, the acquisition, getting the deal done is one piece, but making sure that the integration of that, company, and the culture and the people and the alignment incentives that are set up kind of post acquisition, I'd say is, just as important as, the company that you're trying to buy itself. So,
Interesting. You mentioned people. You also mentioned culture. How do you check for culture in the process of working through an acquisition?
yeah. So again, probably more art, probably more art than, science there or whatnot. But, I think I'm a big believer that culture really does kind of start at the top. And so normally, the folks that you're engaging with is, senior leadership at some level. And you can normally get a pretty quick feel for, the type of culture that they, work down in their organization and the type of people that they're going to hire and that they work with and whatnot. And then, again, just kind of really being able to walk the halls and kind of understand, the type of environment that the folks are working in, how friendly it is. I mean, when you walk into a room, it's like you can kind of feel the room too. So it's similar to, when you walk into an office and you're just even finding your meeting room to have your confidential conversation, but just walking around, you can kind of tell whether, it's upbeat, people are smiling, laughing, happy, or, it's whether it's, more uptight or tense, so to speak. But, that's still to this day, I think one of the most important things is, talent that you bring into your organization and the culture that you kind of, you breed depends, on whether you're going to be successful or not.
Makes sense. So you touched on this briefly, but going from a software dev side into a design build, acquisition, what was that learning curve? What was different?
Yeah, absolutely. So, being the real humble personality that I have, is walked in and said, "How hard could it be?" Right? Like if I can figure out software and IT, even though I'm not a engineer or programmer by nature, I can surely figure out construction engineering. How hard can it be? And so walked in, got put in, got humbled very quickly. And I'm still learning. So I mean, I've been here for a little over 2.5 years now, and every day I learn something new about this industry. Because I mean, when you think about it, and every day I respect it even more than I did the day before. And so, understanding that, that this is an industry that's been around a very, very, very long time. And that doesn't mean that it's easy to understand by any means. It almost means it's more complicated than you could ever really imagine, just because of the compounding, challenges and the way things are being done. Just because that evolves over time, and things compound. But I will say, one thing that was refreshing for me was, having spent most of my time and having to understand and doing projects where there was, especially since I wasn't on the project teams or developing the software myself, I would always just kind of see final product. And it was cool to be able to look at a really clean, unique user interface on a mobile application, or a from a web design or whatever it may be, being able to see that tangible end product. But there was always this like wanting for, you didn't really, it was all going on behind the scenes, and you couldn't really see it being developed and being done in time. And what I really like about the industry that I'm in now is there's always this process that you can see over time, whether it's beginning initial sketches to design, to all the way to when you're seeing the building actually come out of the ground to the final product, and it's this lasting impression. So it's pretty cool, like going from what is sort of an intangible product, and then a lot of its life cycle as it's being developed, to something where every piece about it is really tangible. So I've really enjoyed that aspect as well. And plus,
Yeah.
kind of being able to look back and be like, wow, we built that. That's it's pretty impressive. So it's cool. And it's the same thing. It's not discrediting technology, because it's even more complex, but it just doesn't resonate the same. I think because because we're human nature and just our visualization of like this is physical, this in front of me is this is real, so to speak. So not just lines of code.
For sure. Definitely things that are physical, at least for myself, I know exactly what you're talking about, feel more real and more permanent for sure. Now, the downside of that, from our experiences, with these industries, like you said, older industries, things take longer to change. So, how do you look at these new and emerging innovations and technologies in terms of timelines? Because obviously, in the technology sector, the timelines are very compressed. How do you guys view things that are coming up?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great question. Loaded question for sure. But I think so. That kind of goes back to the original thesis of why Dystruptek, the corporate venture arm of Haskell, was established. Was things are moving very rapidly as far as the technology in the space, and in order to really understand what's going to be impactful, you need dedicated resources focused on this. You can't just kind of task someone part time with it, or like maybe have someone who has innovation in their title kind of somewhat working on something on the side or whatever it may be, and you need kind of those dedicated eyes on it because of how rapidly it is changing. But that doesn't necessarily translate into how quickly it's being adopted or being implemented actually in the field. So I look at it like the rate of change with technology is mind blowing at times, and it's no different in construction technology. I think that it's almost probably before these solutions, in a lot of cases, will even get into really reach scale in a lot of organizations. There's going to be another version, or there's going to be a competitor that is essentially going to emerge kind of post that good idea. Somebody will look at that technology, and then maybe it's a lot about a timing thing. So you don't want to be too early either, and we see a lot of companies that I would say are really working on some revolutionary solutions for companies like Haskell, but they're almost too early in a sense of the rest of not only the industry but even us as being a forward thinking player. I realize the challenges internally, and my company has a mandate to be pushing the envelope and adopting these technologies, but still just inherently to your point, things take time to change. We're also, inherently, adopting new software and technology in our IT environments is not something that normally there's a whole lot of extra bandwidth for, much less the appetite to do that. And so it's always been a really long sales cycle. And I think that sometimes we see that hindering a lot of startups' growth is just saying like, man, I didn't realize it was going to take, this is a 12-month, 18-month sales cycle just to get in, and sign an MSA with you guys, et cetera. And so my group obviously tries to alleviate and cut through a lot of that noise, and that's a benefit of having a separate entity, wholly owned to do this, is that you can kind of more quickly get these solutions up and running, and you don't have to go through the typical contracts that you would have to do with with the mothership, so to speak. And so that helps a lot, but still, I guess I would just say that that's some of the challenges inherently to your point, that not only is the industry kind of slow to move, but we're also, one of the also, and you get that with any big organization, right? It's challenging just to work through the whole vendor management process to begin with. But when you take something like, rapidly evolving, technologies, and then you try to apply it, and you try to, kind of shove it through the typical projects, contracting structure, or the typical security requirements demanded by, your IT, like they should be, it just creates friction points that a lot of times these startups are like, I didn't realize it was going to be this challenging.
Yeah. So, you touched on it a little bit as you were talking, but with your organization, what's your investment thesis that you put out there, and what are the key problems in the marketplace that you see, and how you addressing them?
Yeah, absolutely. And so and in order to address that, I'll just give a little bit more insight as far as from Haskell. So Haskell, the parent company, is design, build, general contractor. We don't do a whole lot of self performance. Probably about 10% or less of our overall works are mostly managing the oversight and doing a lot of design from the project's perspective. And so we have specific areas of focus internally in our business, and then we have broader themes for the overall market. But Dystruptek being the corporate venture arm and making investments on behalf of the parent company in early stage companies that are impacting our business, that's the biggest piece of our thesis. So at us as an investor, as a strategic investor, you can go raise money from anybody, and especially in this day and age that you've got a good enough pitch deck and a good solution and a good management team. Anybody's going to be willing to fund you. But what's valuable from a corporate perspective is that strategic, and the ability to not only provide capital but also provide a client relationship. And so that's a big part of our thesis is, are we now, or would we be in the near future a user of that technology, and would this benefit our organization? Because if we can validate that, we're pretty comfortable to say we're not a whole lot different than our other peer network out there, which is a large part of the market. And saying if it's providing value for us, chances are it can provide value to others. And by being a strategic investor, we can also be able to be one of their largest first clients, be a good reference for them, et cetera. So we provide that mutual benefit beyond just capital. So that's one. And then I think the second part of your question was kind of overall themes for what we're seeing, and where we really see some major impacts. And so I would say that a couple things that really stand out are around really cohesive schedule and management of the project itself. It seems rather rudimentary, but there's some exciting companies coming up in the space, but I don't think anyone's really kind of nailed it yet, from understanding how important the schedule is, and who's viewing all that information, and where and from what perspective, and what's most important to them, and making sure that that all kind of consolidates and rolls up to a dynamic, collaborative, easy to access interface where all parties can be engaged. So essentially, you're going to have the most up to date understanding of what's going on. Another one would be, I think, in just this goes to a bigger component, it's just visibility into what's happening on the job site. So worker tracking is probably a big piece, and it's probably not the most correct way to put it, worker tracking, but essentially being able to understand who's on your job site, where they are, the safety of those individuals as well, and automating a lot of the tasks that kind of go along with that. And, understanding where the resource is, and who it is, can help a lot of that out as well. So those are some.
Wonderful. Now, you got me thinking from Haskell's point of view, what is the core competency that the organization has and that they hang their hat on?
Yeah, so it's really quality and understanding. So it's knowing that when you work with Haskell, you know what you're going to get. It's going to be on time and on budget, and it's going to be a quality product. And so that's what we really hang our hat on. And we don't go chasing a lot of opportunities that we're just trying to win. I mean, we know what we're comfortable with from when we're putting bids on our projects, and we stand by that to say, sure, you're always going to be able to find somebody cheaper, but when you're working with like an organization like Haskell, what you're going to get at the end of the day, and it's going to be consistent, and it's going to be quality, and it's going to be delivered on time and on budget. So that's really where we do kind of stand the proudest, so to speak.
Wonderful. So when you're not working on this and looking at deals, what do you do? Do you have any hobbies?
I used to have time for hobbies. um Yeah, I mean, so anything really outdoors. I don't think that that little farm boy ever left me. So I always enjoy anything to do with nature, and so going on hikes. I'm currently living in Birmingham, Alabama, for a short period, and so lots of outdoor stuff to do here. It's got some rolling hills, nice topography and stuff. So lots of hikes, lots of good overlooks, things like that. A big mountain biker as well, so I like to be able to hit the trail whenever. And this is also one of my favorite seasons, which is snow sports. So I'm a big mountain guy, so haven't had the chance to get out this season yet, just due to COVID and some other things. But hopefully, maybe can pull off a trip somewhere out west before it's too late. But that's probably one of my other favorite pastimes.
Wonderful. Well, you
Yeah.
had a lot of experience in the investing side, but there's a lot of businesses that are not quite there yet. Founders, startups that are kind of growing to a point where it makes sense for your company to acquire. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of these companies. What is the most common advice you give to these companies?
Yeah, I would say being approachable from the perspective of understanding the value that you're trying to deliver, but not coming at it from the fact that you have it all figured out, if that makes sense. Because there's a it's just inherent, especially if you're an earlier stage company. There's always things to learn. So just coming at it from a humble perspective and knowing that here's what we're trying to bring, but help me better understand, is this aligning with what's most important to you, Mr. Customer, and are we over the target when we're discussing and bringing this to market. So and I really do value a lot of those open conversations, and I think again that's another a benefit of talking with a corporate investor versus just a typical VC. Is a VC can give you really good insights, and obviously there's hundreds of amazing venture firms out there that bring in management teams from a diverse background that can hopefully provide that expertise. But it's nice from a corporate's perspective to be able to kind of help also steer and guide some of that product development, and do a little bit of hand holding along the way to make sure these earlier companies are as successful as they can be. So send me an email, find me on LinkedIn, probably the two easiest channels. My email is cutler.knupp at haskell.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Cutler Knupp. And yeah, definitely happy to reach out. This is what we do, kind of a day out basis, is just making connections with companies that are servicing firms like ours or similar in the space. So always happy to strike up a conversation and see where it goes.